Well, thank you. Yeah, as you see, I do have cats in here because I've been taught that when you do professional speaking, you need to have cats in your pictures. And this is the first time I had use for Grumpy Cat. So a little bit about me. So I'm a native Wired. That's my company name. I have my own company, but that's also my Twitter ID. And be warned, you may have noticed that a lot of my tweets are up there, and I do tweet a lot. My average is 32 tweets a day since I started in 11. So I do tweet a lot. I'm also an Agile coach. This is what we do. We run around and hug trees. So I'm an independent Agile coach and have been independent since 13, have been working as an Agile coach since 10. So I go out in companies and help them with different things. At the moment, most of what I'm working with is actually nothing to do with Agile. It's about communication, helping people to actually listen to each other, listen to understand, and not listen to just respond. So that's a lot of what I do is communication. And I do retrospectives because retrospectives is the most important tool we have to learn. I'm also a conference speaker. So I've done this several times. I started out in 13, kind of like someone challenged me. So you have to be brave on your arm. Will you do a talk about that? And then it kind of exploded. So now I speak about 10 conferences a year. And this is my first official one in Denmark. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm also a big hugger. I even have it on my business card. So I do offer free hugs to anyone who wants it. I have this about being brave because in 2011, I started finding out that I was okay. And this is to remind me every day to be who I am, to have the courage to be who I am. And I also do talks about this, variations from are you brave enough to be agile into talking about being brave and vulnerable. And I'm a pirate and an ant. I don't have any kids of my own. But I think my adopted kids is like up to 30 now. And part of that is because I like to play, and they think I'm a pirate. At least some of them do. When my nephew turned 8, I had to tell him I was not. So I disappointed him a bit. I'm also a member of something called Inclusive Collaboration. So last year, one of the big women in Agile, Jean Tabaka, died. And she worked a lot about collaboration and how do we actually bring humanity back in IT, which is a lot of what I work with as well. My friend Sally Ann is autistic, got diagnosed recently, and she does an amazing talk on neurodiversity. And we have a lot of neurodiversity, and part of what I try to do is get workplaces where we have room for everyone. Not just to be nice, but because we need all kinds of brains. And if you have a different brain, no matter if it's about being autistic or if it's about being another culture, we need all that. But that also means that we need workplaces where we have room for everyone. So that's why we started Inclusive Collaboration. So one of the things we did, for instance, at Go to Berlin, there's a quiet room. Because a lot of people who go to IT conferences are introverts. And all of a sudden, they just get enough of people. So they can now go into a quiet room where they don't need to talk to anyone. So that they can last the whole conference instead of just going home because it's too much. So the question is, why am I here? I'm here because I suffer from depressions. I'm here because my 2 big diagnosed depressions was started by stress. And I'm here because I realized that nobody talks about this. So many people walk around and going, yeah, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed. And usually those people are just busy. The people I'm worried about are the ones when you tell them, you know what, the first time I was stressed, it would be a good day if I could get from my bed onto the sofa. And then when my boyfriend would come home, he would literally take me by the hand and take me into the shower so I could get a shower. That's how bad it was the first time I had stress. And when I talked to people about this, every single time I did this, people started opening up. And I remember when I was in IBM, this one guy said to me, you know what, I started crying in my office one day. But then I just went home and I was fine the next day. And I see this all the time, people having all these symptoms of severe stress and not acting to it because we need to just finish this one thing or we need to do the next thing. I was actually supposed to do a different talk here. So I signed up for a talk about the use of your body, the use of your voice. And 4 weeks ago, I had to call Diana and say, you know what, I don't have the time and the headspace for this. If this has been 5 years ago, I would just have done it anyway. And I would have put all my energy into it, and I would have been totally beat. So I'm getting better at it. But I have been home with stress twice. Last time I was home for 9 months, and then I started working 3 hours a week. And when my doctor told me to start working 3 hours a week, I was like, oh, come on, 3 hours a week. Until I worked 3 hours the first time, and I was totally beat up. And I had to rest for several days. But mainly I'm here to make awareness about this. Awareness about that mental diseases that we all have, or a lot of us have, is not something bad. I read last year that about 25% of Danish people feel uncomfortable working with someone who has a mental diagnosis, whether it is depression or bipolar or whatever. And that's a little bit scary, because we have so many people with this, and it's not getting any less. So we need to tell about what is this actually? How can we help people? How can we interact with each other? So the interesting part is, how does stress show? So that's kind of one of the first questions I always get, is how does stress show? How do I know with myself, and how do I know with somebody else that they're stressed? And I have the perfect agile answer. It depends. So I think it's very individual. So one of the things I heard when I was home with stress, so I was sent home in July, and I went to the Christmas party at IBM, and people were like, I don't understand how you can be stressed. You had everything under control. Because their perception was that when you get stressed, you start dropping things, you start dropping balls, there's something you don't get done. When I get stressed, I will get everything done until the day I drop. Like literally drop dead. I will not stop. And that's the way it works with me. And other people start getting confused and forgetting things. So that's the really hard part about this, is to find the right signals. So for me, the hardest part was like, I realized in November, I had a really bad project in IBM where we had to report to 7 levels of managers. And me being the Scrum Master, I protected the team, so they didn't have to do all this. And I remember in November, I was thinking, if this continues, I will literally die from this. And I didn't stop. I didn't go on sick leave until July. And that was only because I didn't have a project. Because, you know, I just needed to pull myself together. I just needed to get a grip. And I hear this so often. And the other part that happened was I start forgetting. People have often told me that I have a really, really scary memory. Now I only have a really scary memory because I lost a lot of my memory when I was sick with stress. When it was the worst, it was so bad that I had no short-term memory. I would always carry a piece of paper and a pen around. And like if I would be sitting in the bus, I would write things down because otherwise I would forget it. And it's not like when somebody tells you something and you're, oh yeah, all right. I literally couldn't remember that I ever had that thought. I would look at that piece of paper and I had no idea I had that thought. I was meeting one of my friends for coffee, and there was this guy, and he looked vaguely familiar. I'm kind of like, yeah, it must be someone I worked with or someone I went to university with. So I did the graduation talk, which means that everyone who graduated that year knows me, and I know some of them. And then we were having coffee, and all of a sudden I realized, fuck, I've been working with this guy for 3 years. I had no recollection of him except a vague memory of his face. And that's how it affects me. And the other part is, this is how my brain feels. It's like the pieces in my brain do not fit. So when I was home the first time, my friend took me to the doctor and I got antidepressives. And all of a sudden, my brain started fitting together again. That's how it felt. Like all of a sudden, the pieces fit together. And I thought this was horrible. It was horrible getting antidepressives because that meant that I was so weak I couldn't handle stuff myself. So as soon as I could, I got off and just sloped slowly into depression again, which I didn't realize until 6 years later, which is a little bit scary. But when I look back, I can see all the signs. And what I realize now is I need antidepressives to function, not to be happy. I hate the Danish term lykkepiller, which means happiness pills. It doesn't make you happy. It allows you to function. The problem we have in Denmark and in a lot of other places is we give them out too fast. If you have a light or a medium depression, antidepressants will not help you. But it's an easy solution. You make a prescription, people go to the pharmacy. It takes a lot more time to actually sit with a doctor or a therapist and work on this. But that's what worked for me the second time. I met with my doctor every 2 weeks and had a 2-hour conversation with him. Because one of the things I found out was that there are a lot of stress coaches around. And the ones I met had one tool, which doesn't work with me. Like, you have to stand in front of the mirror and say that you are perfect. I tried that. I'm kind of like, okay, I'll do anything. And I told him, you know what? I feel like I'm lying to myself. He just said, you need to try it more. And I'm kind of like, in my head, I just went, fuck you, I did this for 5 weeks. It's not going to work. But my doctor, and he also said, you have to get out of your head. I'm like, what? And then he said, yeah, you get into your body. I'm kind of, what? I'm in my body. What are you talking about? And when I went to my doctor, he said, you need to stop thinking so much, and you need to start feeling your body. So one thing he told me was, go home, sit on a chair, close your eyes. Try to sense the chair. Try to feel how it touches your legs. Try to feel how your feet touch the ground. If you have a bathtub, go into that, move your legs. Feel how the water touches your legs. That will help you get out of your head and into your body. Because a lot of stress is caused by our thinking. And that we think we have to do all the time. So another thing that happens often, I also talk to people who have anxiety, is this happens. You get all these amazing things about what you do, and you get that one thing. And that's the one that sticks. So I think that science shows that you need 5 positive things for every negative thing. But when you're in this state, it doesn't help. That one thing just sticks, and it keeps sticking. And that just makes it worse for you. So that's how I was feeling emotionally. So some of the links that I have is for an Australian movie called I Have a Black Dog. His name is Depression. And it shows so well for a lot of people who don't have depressions what it's like. Because that's the thing. People think they just need to help you. That they just need to make you happy. And that's not what it's about. And so one of the things that makes me really angry when people are like, oh, I'm so depressed about this. I'm kind of like, no, you're sad about it. And that's different. You can actually be happy and depressed at the same time. It kind of puts this veil of blackness all over you. So one of the things I've been thinking about is also, why do we see so much of this in knowledge work? We see this all the time, and it's getting worse and worse. I see so many people struggling with this. Oh, and by the way, I'm not a psychologist. This is just all my making up stuff. What I have, and what most people in the knowledge industry have, is there's always more work to do than we can manage. We can never get done. There's always more we can do. So I used to be a tester, and one of the frustrating things was that you had to choose what to test, because you couldn't test everything down to the deepest detail, because then we would never get done. You can't document everything into the smallest detail. I know clients who said the documentation should be so good you can just take that documentation and rewrite the code. It's not worth it. But we kind of always have stuff to do. And we tend to do the stuff that's urgent. Sometimes we do the stuff that's urgent and important. Other times we do the stuff that's urgent and not important because we're so busy. We keep doing. And we forget to stop and do the stuff that is not urgent but very important. I think another thing that is a damage is that we like our jobs. So I've done this also under the title, When Love for Your Work Can Kill You. Because I think that's one of our big problems. If you don't like your job, or if it's just an okay job, it's so much easier to take a sick day. But we mostly like our jobs. Most people in knowledge work have a high education. We spend 3, maybe 5 years getting a high education. That means we really care about this. We made a big effort. We didn't just go in here by accident. So we make a bit of effort in it. And I think that's one of the problems, is we like what we do. People have been telling me sometimes, yeah, but managers push us. Yeah, but my biggest enemy is me. I want to do so many things. I've learned now how to say no to things I don't want to do. My next step is to learn how to say no to stuff I want to do. So I was supposed to do a workshop at Go to Berlin, and I just calculated that. So I'm in Potsdam at Agile Testing Days. I can do my full-day workshop on Monday. On Tuesday, I do my talk that we haven't written yet. And then on Wednesday, I can go into Berlin and do my full-day workshop again. And Diana said to me, no, you can't. I think it's better if you cancel. But I so wanted to do this because I think it's so important to help people. And I think that's one of our biggest dangers. It's so hard for us. And then I think a lot of us suffer from the imposter syndrome. So I have another talk about the imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is basically when we feel like we are fake. When we feel like one day somebody's going to come tap us on our shoulder and say, hey, you don't belong here. For me, it's like, oh, you're not really a proper Agile coach because you don't know systems theory and constraints theory. And I mean, I can at least pronounce Cynefin, but I don't know all the details of it. And I feel like my basic tools is listening to people and caring about them, so maybe I'm not a proper Agile coach. Until a year ago, I would always say, I'm not a real coach. Until I realized, yes, I do not have an education as a real coach, but that's what I am. I listen to people, I put a mirror up in front of them, and I help them see what they can do themselves. So I am a proper coach. But we suffer so much from this imposter syndrome, and one of the things that is about this imposter syndrome is people work really, really hard because they don't want anyone to find out that they're an imposter. They don't want anyone to figure out that they're not good at what they do. My friend told me that her university professor, who has been a university professor for 40 years, still thinks like, one day somebody's going to come up and tap me on the shoulder and saying, John, this has been a big mistake. You're actually not suited for this job. That's how bad it is. And I see it a lot in our industry. We don't have any tangible work. I mean, when I was a tester, I kind of missed doing some code because you can actually see something. It's even worse now. So most of what I do is I plant little seeds in people. I help them grow. I help them take more responsibility. And often I don't see the results of this. Sometimes I'm lucky that somebody comes back to me and says, you know what, that talk you did or that retrospective helped me improve. But most of the time, I don't know what my work does. We don't have any tangible things we can do. And that can also be stressful because that makes it really hard to see if we succeed. And we don't have any natural limits to our work. A carpenter has to be in his shop. He has to go in there because that's where all his tools are. We never leave our brains at work. We always have our brain with us. And most of what we do is using our brain. When you do programming, so little of it is actually typing. Most of it is thinking, solving problems, talking to people. We use our brains, which means that when we leave, we don't leave our tools. And I think that's also why we get stressed. It's so hard to let it go. It's so hard to have techniques to let it go. And then last night I was asked a question by a nice photographer who's running around here, and he said, why do you think this is getting more and more? And I just realized that a lot of what we do, a lot of what we give value, is about doing. We forgot the value of just being. We have to do at work, but we also do in our spare time. Yeah, I'm doing a marathon, or I'm taking this, or I'm a volunteer, or I'm everything. But when was the last time you had a weekend where you just were, where you just existed? When was the last time you had an hour awake without a screen? Or a book? Or another person to talk to? We keep activating, we keep... Yeah, I do like Yoda. I don't know what that happened. So we value this about doing all the time. And that's also related to the imposter syndrome, because what happens is we get praised for doing, especially when we are smart. We get praised, little girls get praised when they're small because they walk faster. And that means that they learn that they are smart. And that when they do, when they walk, when they speak, when they do stuff, that's when they get praise. And we do the same in school. We do. We do that at work. We do. Very few actually award people for being good team workers or for taking care of other people. I see that it's starting in some areas. I just went to this tiny school in England and saw the ending before the school vacation, and they actually had like certificates. So it's a tiny school with 30 people, but they had a certificate for the one who helped his or her schoolmates the most. I kind of like that because then they get emphasis on helping, but also on just being. And there was one that's like, who do everyone always go to? So I think that if we focused more on being and that we are okay, and that's what changed it for me, is I found out that I am okay just being me. I don't need to perform to be good enough. I didn't realize this until 2011. So I spent most of my life trying to perform, trying to do the right thing, trying to get everyone else to praise me when I was good enough the way I am. But I didn't realize that. Before 2011, I would never ever laugh out loud. I would be dressed in gray or black, and I would be trying to hide. In 2006, I had the goal in IBM to speak up in my team. And now I'll be like, yeah, you want me to talk in front of 4,000 people tomorrow? Sure, what do you want me to talk about? I've found that who I am is okay. By being, I'm okay. And that helps me not get as stressed. I'm still bad at it because there's so many things I want to do. And that's, again, we like our jobs, we like what we do, and I think that's our biggest danger. So the question is, what can you do? So if you're stressed, what can you do? I have some tips. Some of them I tried. Say no. This is hard. And now comes the even harder part. Say no to stuff you already agreed to do. When you realize that you are overbooked, and when I mean overbooked, I don't mean that every single time slot is filled and then you also work in the evenings. I mean when every single time slot is booked and you don't have headspace to actually do stuff, say no. And do it. If you do it early, people are not gonna take that out on you. If you do it the day before, yes, maybe they might get angry, but they will understand. But as soon as you feel like, hey, this is too much, go back and say, you know what? I know I agreed to this, but I can't. Is there something else I can do for you, or can I do it later? Of course, do it in a nice way, but start saying no. This is my big thing that I should do one day. Plan preparation time. So if you do a workshop, for instance, or you have to do any kind of presentation, whether it's a code review, for instance, or whatever, plan time to prepare this. Actually book time in your calendar. Most of what I do is talk to people. I either talk to people in meetings, or I talk to people in the hallway, or I do a lot of my work actually at the coffee machine. And if I don't book time to prepare my workshops when I do that, the time just disappears. Because there's so much we can do, there's so many people we can help, there's so many problems to solve. So I do try to do this. Also, if you have to fill out some documents for whatever, go in and book that time in your calendar and plan this preparation time. And relax your brain. I already talked about this, about getting more into your body, but it's also about relaxing your brain. So one thing you can do is meditation. This is also something that I'm going to do one day. I do it when I am with someone who does a guided meditation, and it really helps me. Meditation is about finding that space between the thoughts. Be in that space where you are, and not where you keep thinking all the time and where you do all the time. And also mindfulness. And I see these two things as very different. When meditation, you go in and you find the space. Mindfulness is more about being aware of all the things around you. When you eat something, actually taste what you're eating. So I am a consultant, I travel a lot, and in the beginning I would always eat either with a computer or a book in front of me. And I still do that. Some days I'm just like, whatever, I need something to eat. But other days I'll go into a restaurant, I'll read my book until the food comes, and then I'll put it away. And I will actually look at the food and taste the food. And we don't do this often enough. I will go out into the sand and feel it between my toes. I will be aware of the wind. Like I went to the Isle of Skye, and you kind of stand at the end of the world, and you stand there, and the winds of the Atlantic just blows into your whole body. That's amazing, and that helps us get out of our brain. You can do exercise. If you are very stressed, exercise is not good for you, same as if you're very depressed. But exercise is good for you. And exercise is good for you also to prevent this. A lot of my friends say that running is like meditation. It actually helps them get out of their head. I think running is horrible. I hate it every minute. People are like, yeah, but you just need to try it long. I'm like, I tried it for 6 months. And they're like, oh, but doesn't it feel good when you're afterwards? I'm kind of like, yes, because I'm not running. I never really got that runner's high. I don't get it. And also a lot of my people are like, yeah, but then you have this competition with yourself and you get better every time. And I don't care. Some of my friends like always run on what's called on a mill, because then they can see how much better they get. I don't really care. But what I do is I like rowing. I like a rowing machine. And I now have the water rower, and it actually sounds like proper water. When you row, it sounds like rowing in water, and you don't have to go outside. And it's pretty. But I kind of get into this meditative state where I just go into just doing and doing and doing. It's nice. This is my friend Toby. He does ultra. So last year he won the 200-mile run in Sweden. He's a little bit nuts. But he's also a really good friend. And some of the things he also says is that when you do ultras and when you run, that's very much about how we work as well. Nobody goes out and does a marathon. Well, not nobody. Most people don't go out and do a marathon and then do one the next day. I read about this woman who actually does one every day. But most people don't. When he came back for the 200-mile run, he couldn't stand. He had to crawl to the bathroom the first day. And he does it again. I'm like, yeah. But you rest afterwards. To be able to run, you need, or do any kind of exercise properly, you need nutrition, you need rest, and you need exercise. You need to practice. We need to do the same for our brain. We need nutrition, which can be going to a talk, it can be reading a book, it can be listening to a beautiful piece of music. We need exercise. We need to exercise our brain, otherwise it's going to deteriorate. And it will. As we get older, it deteriorates, and we can help some of it by keeping it active, and then you need to rest. And we often forget that part. And I think part of it is because it's not visible. If I broke my leg, I would be careful the whole time, because I would know that, okay, now I need to wear my crutches, and people would also be aware of what they could do to help me. We take that so much more serious. And the thing is, our leg grows back together in, I think, 6 weeks or something like that. It takes a lot longer for the rest of us, for our brain. But we tend to just look at that as just, yeah. Oh, and this is the interesting thing, asking for help. And that's, I mean, in many ways. So when I do proper Scrum and teach that, we talk about the 3 questions. And the one that people have the most problems with is, do you have any impediments? Because we don't like to ask for help. Because we are afraid that if we ask for help, that means we're not good enough. A lot of people suck at asking for help. What I'm practicing is asking for help when I don't totally need it. I'm really good at asking for help. Like if I need to put up a painting in my house or whatever, I call my brother, because I can't do any of that. But like even having somebody say, you know what, should I carry your suitcase? Because you've been carrying it a while. That is so hard for me because I can carry my own suitcase. But sometimes accepting that help or asking for it before it's necessary can be really good for you. The first times I had to cancel something, I actually used Torbjørn. So I had to cancel for the booster because I realized that I was too stressed to do that talk. And I called him, I said, I need you to give me permission to actually cancel my talk, because I was not able to give myself permission. And of course, the better thing would be if I could give myself permission, but I couldn't. So I used him to help me. And he gave me permission, and I canceled, and they had plenty of time to find a new speaker. But that's one thing you can do. And I also have some of my friends who are now home with stress who use me this way, who kind of ask me to give them permission to not do anything that day, because we find it so hard to give ourselves that permission. So ask for help and take that help. And take time off. That's also something. People go like, oh, so you're a consultant because you want to be rich. No, I'm a consultant because I want to be free. I took 4 months off this year. And part of me goes a little bit like, oh shit, am I going to get a job? What about the next thing? What if I take all this time off? Are people going to forget me? And then my wise friend again goes, when was the last time you got someone contact you without looking for a job? All a week ago. When was the last time before that? The week before. Do you think people are going to forget you? No. Take time off. Even try taking a weekend off. So many of us don't take weekends off. And I know it's hard if you have kids, for instance, or if you have a spouse or whatever. But try and find these small pieces that way you can take time off. And to me, I'm kind of like, the worst thing that can happen is I don't get a job. Well, I'll sell my apartment, I'll move in with someone. Whatever. Doesn't matter, it's just money. The other part is my life. The other is me, and that's what's so much more than just money. Another question I get very often, so how do I help others? I'll start with a lot of don'ts. Never ever say pull yourself together. Don't worry, we're doing that ourselves. When you are stressed and when you feel bad, you will be saying this to yourself. Many people are worse off than you. That's true. There are people who don't get food every day. But the problem with saying these things is we go into this vicious circle of then starting to blame ourselves. And then we get more stressed. And we feel like it's all our fault. Or you have no reason to be depressed/stressed. You have a good life. Yeah. That's not what it's about. It's not like you can say logically, okay, you have a job, you have a husband, you have 2 kids, now you're happy. That's not how it works. It has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with the way we act, the way we perceive the world, and how we treat this. And never, ever, ever say it's all in your head. Because yes, it is. That's the problem. Like I said, if I broke my arm, it would be so much easier, but this is all in my head. And somehow we don't take that serious. And if you tell someone, you know what, it's all in your head, you can just pull yourself together. We will start doing that. Yeah, I should just pull myself together. I should just do these things. Don't ignore them. I think we tend to do this. So there's a really good book called Time to Think. And one of the things they mention in there is when somebody cries in front of you, we try to stop them as soon as possible. Because we feel very, very uncomfortable when people cry in front of us. Well, maybe you should just let them cry. Maybe you should just let them get it out. Try listening to them. But we tend to kind of like my sister called me, she's like, there's this guy and he's coming back from work, from being stress sick for 6 months. I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? Because I don't want to kind of push him into the stress again. So what do I do? My best advice is ask them. What do you need? If you need an ear, I'm here. If you need something else, let's find out. But don't ignore them. Oh, and try not to be what we call in Danish lommepsykolog. Try not to get unfunded advice. The things that I've been talking about is stuff that helped me and helped some of my friends. But people tend to, you know what, if you just take this pill or whatever, you will be happy. If you just do this, you will be blah, blah. Try not to give this unfunded advice because it's not helpful and none of us are experts. So if it's really bad, take them to a doctor. That's one thing you can do. That's one thing that my friend did the first time. She literally took me by the hand and took me to the doctor. And that is very necessary. It's actually so the highest reason for men between 18 and 35 in United Kingdom to go to the doctor is actually stress. And these are the men that go. Research showed last year in Denmark that that's one of the reasons men die earlier. There was this story about a guy, he would go into the locker room and eat lunch because he was afraid somebody would ask him, how are you? And he didn't want to lie. We train our boys to not cry. Boys don't cry. Don't be weak. So actually a lot of men suffer from this a lot more than women because, since we're the weak sex, we know we have to ask for help. Men are not supposed to, which means that they keep it inside until they die. It's one of the reasons the rate of suicide is higher among men. And also the way people try to commit suicide is different. Women usually do it so that they survive and because it's a cry for help. Men are usually much better at committing suicide, which is really bad. So also consider this. Offer your help, subtle. Go to that person and say, you know what? I see that you've been struggling. Is there anything I can do for you? Do you want to go for a cup of coffee? Talk to people. Listen. I don't know where I got this term, but grow your ears and open your heart. We tend to want to solve things. Some people say, men always try to solve problems. I don't think it's about men. I think it's also about that we are engineers and computer scientists. That's what we do. We solve problems. Like Jessica tweeted yesterday, one of my quotes is, the hardest thing of being an agile coach is to keep your mouth shut. So many things I just want to say, if you just do this, it would help you. And sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I'm not. But I help people more if I listen. If people are stressed, if people are depressed, you help them more by listening, by caring for them. And tell them to go to a professional. Because we don't know all these things. We can't. I mean, we don't even know all the things in our areas. How are we supposed to know everything in psychology? How are we supposed to know what helps this one person? So if it's really bad, tell them to go to a professional. Sorry. That was actually me. And respect what they feel. It's a little bit back to the, you don't have any reason to be depressed or stressed or whatever. Respect that people actually feel this way. Because we do not read minds. We do not know how it feels to be inside another person. When I go out and do a talk with Toby, or Torbjörn, he is terrified every single time. Even if he's done tons of talks, he's terrified every time. I'm totally relaxed. I just feel at ease. But you can't tell. You can't tell which one of us is stressed. You can't tell what's going on inside people. It's the same as when people go, I thought you weren't an introvert because you like to go to parties. That's not what it's about. We don't know what's going on inside people. And we have no right to judge it. So respect what people feel. And include them. Because if we don't include people, if we keep them out to not stress them, what happens is they'll feel more outside. And that will even make it worse. And then one of the most important things, actually care about people. Doesn't mean you need to go around hugging them, though I would always offer that, but that's because I like to hug. You should never hug anyone who doesn't want to, because that's a violation. But do care about people. Even if it's just bringing them, I keep talking about the coffee, but bringing them a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, saying, can I help you with something? But care about people. And especially working in teams, we do need to care about each other. We work so closely together, we need to care. So about the including people, this is Eeyore. So you probably all know Eeyore or Æseldyr. He's so sad always. He's really sad. But his friends always include him. They always ask him, do you want to join this? Do you want to join that? There's a time when he has his birthday and they think people forgot him. And he's really sad. But then people come and they bring him gifts and they bring him a cake. And he's almost happy, just for a moment. So even if people cannot take place on the terms that you want them to, ask them. Try to include them. I have a friend who's bipolar, which was also activated by stress. When I had my 40th birthday, I called him and said, would you like to go to my birthday? I know you feel uncomfortable with a lot of people around, so it's okay if you don't. I gave him the option to be in or not, and we ended up going out for tea a day instead, because he feels so uncomfortable when there are lots of people around. Make space for people to be who they are. And we also need to do that in our workplace. I did a talk earlier in England this year about being human and professional, which somehow seems to be mutually exclusive. We are supposed to be professionals. When I got my hair dyed blue, people would go like, "Oh, how are you going to get a job?" But at that point I was working at Lego, so I kind of went, duh, I'm working at Lego. When I got my first tattoo, people were like, "Oh, but you're never going to work in a blah blah." Well, if people cannot handle I have a tattoo, I'm not going to work there anyway, because they're probably going to put me into this mold where I don't fit. We spend so much time being professional, putting on a mask, putting on a facade, and that energy could be used to work, to take care of ourselves. Why can't we just be who we are? Why do we need to fit into this? And of course, you need to do this with respect. If you meet Japanese business people, you should wear a suit. You should show respect for them. But why do we think we always have to dress the same way? At the moment, I'm working at Spotify, and they talk about, oh yeah, we don't have a dress code. Which is not really true, because if you come in a suit or a shirt, they'll be like, oh, you're going for a job interview. So even in places where we don't have an official dress code, we do. We have this cultural thing that tries to put people into a mold because that's what we like. It's so much easier if people would just fit in, be nice and logical, if we know how people act. So many people want a recipe for Agile, but it doesn't work because we're dealing with humans. Humans are messy. Humans are complex. Each individual is an individual. We have different needs, we have different ways of acting, but we try to put it into the same. In my ultimate team that I had, high-performing team, yes, I've seen one, we had this alpha geek, and I've never seen a guy who could do so much amazing stuff. And usually we would have the rule that everyone has to speak in a retrospective, except him. Because we knew that if he had something, he would do it. We also did, for our daily, we would take turns in doing the dailies, and we would have to print out the burn down chart every day so we had it visible. And when it was his turn, one of us did it. We made room for him because we valued him as a person. And I tried meeting people years later, said, oh, you worked with him. He never says anything. And I'm kind of, are you kidding me? We had so many times where he talked about, we had a board game club. We talked about solar eclipses. He travels for solar eclipses. How can you say he doesn't talk? But he felt so comfortable with us because he was allowed to be who he was. And I think that's also something that can help us with this stress. If we are allowed to be who we are. And of course there are frames. You can't just get anything the way you want. You need to figure out how does it work in your team or in your area. But if we stay in too many places where we do damage to ourselves, we are going to get stressed. So my stress nowadays is because I cannot say no to all the magical, amazing things that are out there. It's not because there's so many constraints on me. Actually, I think it's because there's too few constraints on me. So I can do anything I want in the whole world. I just need to start prioritizing. So I think if I lived to be 190, I still wouldn't have read all the books I want to read. I still wouldn't have gone to all the conferences I want to go to. Still wouldn't have met all the people I want to. And that's so annoying. And that stresses me out sometimes. But I'm also getting much, much better at that. I did a talk in Helsinki this year, and I was kind of like, it's my first time in Helsinki. And I decided to spend the whole Saturday in my bed instead, because I was so exhausted after doing my talk. And yes, I missed out on Helsinki. And yes, I may never come back. But that's okay. I try to enjoy the things that I do have. I try to enjoy when I can go somewhere and see something. Sometimes we need to miss out on all the cool stuff to take care of ourselves. And yes, it is annoying. So, wrap up. Ask for help. I think this is the most important thing. Whether you are feeling stressed or you see someone feeling stressed, ask for help. Maybe if you see someone who's really stressed and you are not connected enough to that person, ask for help to go to their manager, go to someone you know who's good at talking to people. That's one of the problems with being in IT is we learn a lot of technical skills, but nobody teaches how to talk to each other. And most definitely, nobody teaches how to listen to each other. I don't know if you heard about coding dojos. I do coaching dojos. I do listening dojos because we forget how to listen to each other. So try doing that. Try talking to each other. I used to say if people would just talk to each other and listen to each other, I wouldn't have anything to do because that's half of what I do. I help teams actually talk to each other and listen to each other and figure out that they are different and how do they work together. I help them realize that, yes, maybe we should talk to our stakeholders. If we're late, we should talk to our stakeholders. Most of what I do is about helping and talking. And if we would just do this much more, I think we would avoid a lot of the stress that we have. And please care for each other, because there's no one else to do it. You need to care for yourself first, and sometimes you're not able to. But try to care for yourself. Try to take that time off. It's just money. You can't eat money. You can take it into your grave, but it's not going to help you. You have to value your life, and you have to value the damage before you get all the damages. I am damaged. I can see my memory has severe loss, and it's not just because I'm getting older, but my memory does have severe loss after being having stress twice. And that's just something I need to live with. I have brain damage. It might be small brain damage, but it is brain damage. And that's what happens. We get heart attacks, we die, we get brain damage, we get physical diseases. One of my friends, her legs all of a sudden started swelling up, like she looked like had elephant legs. Turned out it was stress. Your body will do whatever it takes to get your attention. And it's not logical. So take care of yourself. Thank you very much. Oh, and if you don't feel comfortable asking questions here, my information is also here. I am always up for a talk. I'm always up to help you. So please contact me. We can have a Skype session, whatever. So please stay in touch.
Thank you very much. I have questions in this app. Well, actually, I have a lot of prizes in this app for you, of course. But I also have questions. I will start with, how can we forget about work problems when we get home?
Well, I'm not sure we always can. I think that's the hard part. Some people make rituals. I know one friend, he has this tree outside, and he kind of mentally goes home and puts it there before he enters the door. One thing that I do sometimes, I do a brain dump, where I just have a piece of paper and I write down everything that's in my brain. That kind of somehow, knowing that's on paper, even though I know from experience I'm never going to look at that again, it helps. That can be one way of getting it out of your head. But I think you need to find your own techniques, because different things help for different people. Some people, like I said, do the running, and they say it helps make their head clear and they can just move on. One of my friends likes to commute, because she has an hour home, and she just puts on nice music, and when she gets home, she's let go of all the work. So those are different techniques, but I don't think there's one technique for all. And some of us really, really suck at letting it go, including me.
Thank you. Another question. How would you, as a manager, handle people who you suspect to be stressed or depressed?
Well, first of all, I would talk to them. I think that's one thing we often forget. Same as when people go like, how do I make my team do this? Well, ask them. Talk to them. Take that person and go for coffee. A good thing could, for instance, be to take them for lunch outside the building. Sometimes when you go outside the building, it makes it so much easier to talk about things. And by doing food, which is a good pattern, by doing food, your brain tells you that you're connected somehow. And that may help that person open up to you. And then take the time to listen. And if you feel uncomfortable, if you're not really a people person, talk to someone who is and ask them to talk to this person, but figure out what's going on. And be aware that a lot of people are not aware how stressed they are. And they're not aware of the signals. So be concrete. Like if you see I'm worried about you because I see you sending emails every evening at around 10, 11. Maybe they'll tell you, you know what, it's because so I can go home at 3, I can pick up my kid, and then I take an hour in the evening. That's okay. But maybe it's because, yeah, I keep thinking about this and I do this. So listen for those signals and then ask how you can help them. Find out what they can do. Maybe they need to take one day off, and that's okay, and we need to make room for that. But talk to them and figure out what's going on, because, like I said, it's so different from us what we need to do. And stuff that works for one person definitely doesn't work for another.
Questions from the audience? No? So thank you once more for your talk.
Thank you very much.